Thank you for having me here tonight. I was asked to talk about Canada, and as someone that grew up here, but then moved to California to build our last technology business, I learned a lot about, I think, what separates Valley-based startups and Valley-based thinking from Canadians. And I'm trying, ever since moving home, to introduce more of what I call naive thinking to Canadian startups and Canadian entrepreneurs, because I think that's one of the key ingredients we need to build a prosperous long-term economy here in Canada. So like Mark said, I'm the founder of Wealthsimple. We're a 3-year-old business. We try to make investing simple for people, and we do that through great technology and design. We're trying to build a brand that resonates with individuals. As a financial services business that has your best interests at heart, we think people trust banks because they're big and old, not because they actually believe banks put their interests first or stand for things they believe in. And we're really excited that after 3 years, we've grown quite fast. And like Mark said, we have more than $1 billion today for 40,000 Canadian clients. Just this year, we launched in both the US and the UK as of 8 weeks ago in London. And I think we're trying to do something that most Canadian companies and most financial services business wouldn't do, which is, despite working in a highly regulated, enormously competitive market, compete on a global scale and build one of the next great Canadian champions right here from Canada, which is something, one of the next great global champions right here from Canada. And so that's something we're pretty excited about. Who here has read the book, Why Mexicans Don't Drink Molson? Any hands? One in the back. A couple. Awesome. This is one of my favorite books. The premise of the book is quite simple. It says, why is it that Mexico, right, a country that has very little fresh water, very little barley, produces 5 times as much beer as Canada? A country, a world leader in both of those categories, right? I think to Mark's point, it actually goes through 6 or 7 different industries and talks about how we have all of the ingredients to build truly global champions. And yet, for some reason, we haven't figured out the recipe, to put it all together and actually create those sorts of companies. And I think this is a real problem. If you actually Wikipedia, what is Canada's, they have these great top 10 lists of countries all over the world. And if you Wikipedia for Canada, any guesses on what our #1 is? What are we best known for? You think hockey, maple syrup. The actual answer is we are the #1 flax-producing nation in the world. Not a particularly inspiring accomplishment. And I think this is, a particularly big problem, because I think that our economy today, as all of you know, is based on 2 things. We pull things out of the ground and we finance that activity. And the reality of the way the world is moving is every nation in the world needs to transition towards an innovation-based economy, or that needs to be an increasingly important part of any economy to thrive in the environment in which we're operating today. And Canada sits number 22 on the global rankings of innovative countries around the world. So we are far behind where we need to be to compete and succeed on a global basis. And why I think this is particularly important is, if you think about it, there are some massive global trends that are reshaping industries all over the world. And we've actually got a great position in many of them. I was in Silicon Valley just 3 weeks ago, and we were in a meeting with Eric Schmidt from Google. And he talked about how the last 10 years at Google, Google was trying to be a mobile-first company. And we all know what mobile did over the last 10 years, right? The iPhone just celebrated its 10-year anniversary with the iPhone 10. Reshaped everything. But then now Google thinks of itself over the next 10 years not as a mobile-first company, but as an AI-first company. And when you think about Canada and our capability in this space, we're right up there with all the heavy hitters around the world. We're #1, #2, or #3 in several cities in terms of AI talent and academic research and the ability to play a role in shaping this global trend. So not only do I think it's an imperative, I actually think it's a massive opportunity for us if we do something about it and we seize it. And why it's particularly important is, I think historically, and the banks and the dairy industry are great examples, it was okay to play the let's just keep it Canada, let's keep it safe strategy. I don't think that's an option for us going forward. So we're going to do a quick thought experiment. Anybody here know how long it took the telephone, what I would argue is one of the first social networks, right, to reach 50 million users? Anybody have a guess? 75. Bang on. 75 years is exactly right. That was impressive. Wow. How about the television? Now you've set expectations. 13. It was a little faster than that. That was pretty. I actually skipped the radio, which I think was 35, so you did pretty well if I do the normal progression here. How about the internet? 4. Pokemon Go. 13 days. That's the pace at which we are all competing today. The next transformative innovations happen fast. They happen, I think, increasingly on a global scale. This is one of the reasons we, even as when we launched in the US as a 2-year-old Canadian financial services, rinky-dink startup at the time, decided to launch in the US, a highly competitive, enormously difficult market, because we believe the companies that will shape the future of financial services will for the first time be global, where the regulatory constraints of doing things in certain geographies and staying there isn't going to be enough to protect your business. And if you look at what's happening in Asia, and you think about financial services and how that market grew up, it skipped bank branches, it skipped the laptop computer, it went straight to mobile phones. And if you want a glimpse into what the future competitors of all of our industries are going to look like, I think it's a really helpful lens to think about. So our view is you've got to compete and you've got to play to win on the global scale. So I think the biggest missing ingredient we have in Canada to put together this recipe to win is what I like to call a little bit of naive ambition. And I'd love to share, just in closing, kind of our naive ambition at Wealthsimple. And the first time I shared this was 3 years ago when we launched the company. It was our first week in business. We convened a small meeting of our biggest advisors around the company. And they asked me, Mike, what is the vision for the business that you want to build? And this is what I told them, and they just about laughed me out of the room. And that was the first time I said it. The second time we said it was 6 months ago when we hit $1 billion under management, and we were very fortunate to have the Prime Minister come to our office to celebrate that milestone with us. And we told this to him and all the press in front of him, and I think our board still might think we're crazy for doing that, but it went like this. Vanguard, which is one of the companies I most respect on the planet, is a 40-year-old business, totally changed the landscape for financial services. It took them 30 years to get to their first $1 trillion in assets. Today they manage $4 trillion around the world. BlackRock is the largest asset manager in the world. They manage $5.5 trillion. They're a 30-year-old business. It took them 20 years to get to their first trillion. The next company to get to $1 trillion in assets will do it in 15 years or less, and we want to be that company. And why shouldn't that be a Canadian company? Why shouldn't we have the ambition and the aspiration to go build something that changes the landscape for people all over the world? So that's what we're out to do. I hope you'll join us. And thank you so much for having me here tonight. I hope you enjoy the party.